Hello everybody, it's Joy Forrest with Call to Peace Ministries. Today is Q&A Saturday. So last week I posted a video and I asked if anyone had questions, and interestingly enough I only got two, and they were pretty much the same question. One is basically I want to find out why the pastor supports the abuser. I'm so confused. And the other one was along the same lines, about a person who was in pastoral care, who knew about the abuse and barely seemed to care, and just told me to leave. He told me to leave, and even just friendly to my husband, has never challenged him on it. So basically, this is a question I've gotten a lot over the years. But first of all, I just want to start by saying I love the church. I love pastors, and the vast majority of them are good folks. So this is not to pastor bash, because I think there are groups out there that kind of tend to do that. I believe that if pastors are missing missing abuse in their midst, it's because maybe they just don't understand it. I do believe people perish for a lack of knowledge. But number one is, I believe that most abusive people are very charming. They look great on the outside. After all, they fooled us into hooking up with them, so they are fooling the people around them as well, including the pastor. A lot of times they can be involved in ministry. Sometimes they are in ministry. We see that in our support groups sometimes. But again, there's a difference between their public persona and what goes on behind closed doors. So it makes it very difficult for people to believe that someone that nice could actually be abusive behind closed doors. Again, the answer to this is just understanding the dynamics of domestic violence and coercive control. And if we don't understand that, it's going to be really easy to miss it. Number two, we as victims are taught to cover up and hide the abuse. We're taught to make the abuser look good. And most of us, until it gets unbearably painful, will not reach out for help. So when we do finally reach out, they're going, well, why didn't you tell me about this before? We have done a great job of convincing people that it's not as bad as it looks, or that there's nothing even going on at home. So, that's part of the problem. But then there's also the problem of, maybe you've reached out before and you weren't believed. Again, for these same reasons, it's kind of like a vicious cycle. But it is a very difficult thing, because we really do tend to make our abusers look really good on the outside. Again, it's like Dr. Jekyll Mr Hyde. They look great on the outside. They look great to the world, but they are different people at home. And another reason, I think, is because abusers can work very hard at discrediting their victims. I cannot tell you the stories I've heard and the lengths that some abusers have gone to make their partners look incompetent, unstable, even, emotionally disturbed and things like that, so that they can always keep an upper hand. And so and a lot of times when it comes to counseling, you go in for joint counseling, which is not recommended in these cases. But the abusive person will be very calm, cool and collected, probably knows all the psychological lingo, and the victim will be just a bundle of nerves, frazzled, anxiety-ridden, even maybe a little hysterical. So it does make them seem more reliable as far as a witness to what's going on. And so one of the things that I do when working with victims is teach them not to react like that, but to learn to respond. Even if you have to act and go against all your emotions, it doesn't serve you very well to be that upset when you go in. And then I think one other thing, well, there's a couple other things, but one is, and I found this in my own case, the belief that abuse is provoked. Nobody thinks, they don't understand the dynamics. They don't understand the coercive control that's going on. They don't understand that victims are basically tell us that they are walking around on eggshells. They're afraid to do anything. They're not out to try to set something off, but That's what most people believe. I remember going for counseling sessions years ago with my ex, and I remember one counselor or pastor said, "Well, what are you doing to make him so angry?" And I thought, "Oh my goodness, I'm doing everything in my power not to make him angry." But again, in the normal world, people don't get that upset unless somebody did something. But with abusive people, you don't really have to do that much to provoke them. However, again, there is this common misperception that domestic violence is provoked, and it's not. And then finally, this is the one that I've had a hard time with, and I had to finally come to terms with, that there are churches that have misplaced doctrines on male headship and submission, and they do tend to enable abusers. So I've had some victims come to me and say that they've been told that they needed to submit to their husbands. And basically, when they're told that in a counseling session, then it serves to empower the abuser. And again, even just the way that the pastors themselves may understand headship and submission can be problematic when it comes to domestic violence. Again, I would say the vast majority of pastors are not in this boat, but it does happen. And so, as far as the last lady that was asking and saying that, you know, that pastoral worker knew about the abuse but wasn't doing anything to even confront the abuser. There becomes a line when if you see abuse going on and you are not doing anything but enabling it, then in my opinion, then those folks are going to have to stand before God and give an account. I mean, it says in James that not every one of us should even want to become teachers because we're going to have a stricter judgment. It talks about in Ezekiel and in Jeremiah, there are lots of passages that talk about the shepherds who don't shepherd the sheep properly and who wound them. It says in Ezekiel 34, 2-4, it says, "I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak, but the sleek and strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with judgment." And the reason it says that is because before that, it says, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds. I will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them." And so one of the things, if you just go back further up, it says that what the shepherds have done is that they've clothed themselves and taken care of themselves, but you have not strengthened the weak or healed the sick or bound up the injured, and you have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost, but you have ruled them harshly and brutally. And if somebody is telling you to stay in an abusive situation that is harming you and your children, then I would say that they fall under that category. They're going to have to answer to God. You can find a church. There are so many good churches, and there's so many people out there who will be supportive of you. That's what I recommend, is that you find people who can support you, because you don't need to stay with someone who is going to force you to stay in something that is harmful. God really has called us to peace. That's what this ministry is all about. If you have any more questions, or if you would like to add a question for our Q&A next week, I hope you'll just send us a message. But in the meantime, I hope you'll have a great week.